Welcome to this week's episode of the Deliberate Leader podcast, and I'm so glad to be joined by Kylee Leota. Kylee, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Rita. I'm so excited to be here. I've been a big admirer of yours for a long time.
Oh, likewise, right back at you. Kylee and I know each other from some work we've done it from a networking perspective together. So we've had the opportunity to admire, I think, both of us from afar, which is beautiful. And also in preparing for this, just getting to know a little bit more about what you do. And I love your style. So I knew that you'd be great to come and share some wisdom, particularly deliberate wisdom, with our audience and our leaders. By way of introduction, this is the awkward bit, Kylee. So you can cover your ears. I know it's always people read your bio, but for everybody else, Kylee Leota is the founder and chief vision officer of Elements for Success, a global organization delivering transformational experiences to individuals, teams, and organizations. You consult and work collaboratively with psychiatrists, psychologists, and other professionals to create sustainable behavior change, which I love for clients, particularly in coaching. Kylee, people can jump onto your website and we'll pop it into the show notes. We've got a whole bunch to talk about because I know you've got a new book coming out.
Super exciting.
Yeah, which is Infinite Leadership, coming out in December. So people may be listening at different times of the year, but that's, in less than 2 months' time. And are you happy to give us a little bit of a little kind of behind the curtain view? What's Infinite Leadership all about, and what are you hoping that people take away from the book?
Yeah, so infinite leadership was a bit of an interesting thing. So to give people a bit of a background, I had a job for a very, very long time. So I didn't come up in the business world, having a business, foundation and everything like that. And for a long time, I think in my life, I was existing and I wasn't overly deliberate. I was kind of plodding along through life. And what I realized is I had a really significant personal situation where I left a domestically violent relationship. And it was really difficult, really challenging. There was lots of, it was messy, it was ugly. And it's really easy to sit there and get stuck in victim mode because factually I was a victim of domestic violence, and that's a horrific thing to navigate. But what I needed to do was make more conscious choices about what my next steps were moving forward and how to pick myself up and keep moving. So I didn't sit and, in this, I guess, victimhood. And I remember at the time going, I have a degree, I'm in a leadership position, I have all of these, great things happening. How did this happen to me? And it was one of those, self-reflective moments where I sat there and went, a lot of my life has been around being the people pleaser and again, making unconscious choices around making sure everybody else is okay, but not maybe making myself okay. And I'd done lots of different things in my world. And I went, okay, what needs to happen? And I think one of the biggest challenges in life is that we get to somewhere, whether it be a position at a job or in life, and we sit there and go, okay, we're now here. But we don't remember that life is an infinite journey. It's an ongoing, progressive, this realization of things over and over again. And when we stop being conscious and active participants around what learning do I need to get to the next step, whether it be in a personal relationship or in our business or in leadership, is that we become stagnant, and it can make for complacency and it can make for acceptance of things. And I think the comfort zone is one of the most poorly named things in the whole entire world because most people aren't comfortable. It's familiar. And so it's the known, and there's that saying, better the devil you know. And even in my personal circumstance, people talk about, well, why don't you just leave? And why don't you just do this? Well, it was a known quantity for me, as opposed to this walking out of being a single parent of 3 kids and what was that going to look like and how was I going to do that and all of these things. So part of my journey started off on a real personal level, and me recognizing I had, there's lots of really good supports in the world, but it was actually my leadership lessons that I'd been using in leadership life for a very long time. That once I started applying them into my personal life, that's actually got me the transformation that I needed. And then that then recalibrated into my professional life. And then that recalibrated into my personal life. So this ongoing evolution that started once I started looking at myself and recognizing this was an infinite journey for me. And once I realized that infinite learning is just part of this process, then that opened up infinite possibilities and infinite opportunities, even giving myself permission to see those and embrace those opportunities that maybe I wouldn't have previously. So infinite leadership is around driving continuous improvement to create excellence for everybody. And it's around the fact that, as leaders, we have this enormous responsibility to lead others, but we've got to start with leading ourselves. But equally, for those that maybe don't see themselves as a leader, this a continuous improvement journey is around creating excellence for everyone. So that means that you can be a leader wherever you're at. And it's an ongoing evolution of the skills, because that what got you here won't get you there kind of model. And we've got to continually, evolve our game. And that's an infinite journey. And once we can accept that that's an infinite, opportunity, then it kind of takes away the resentment. Instead of going, oh my God, I've just got to this next level, and now you're going to make me do all these things to get to the next level. I'm like, well, this is just the next opportunity. This is just the next learning as my, journey to evolve through this, this life, whether it be personal or professional. And my business Elements for Success comes off the Earl Nightingale quote, which is he's the OG of personal development. And he talks about success as the progressive realization of a worthy goal or ideal. And so, again, that continual infinite idea that things are ongoing. And there's lots of different elements, and what the elements that you need to be successful, or what you constitutes for success for you, Rita, might look different to me. It might look different to the listeners or the people watching this podcast. But there's lots of different elements, and the infinite pillars all represent a different element. And so you can pick and choose, and you can work through them, and you can go back and recalibrate those different elements at different phases of your journey. So it's recognizing that this is a tool that can be recalibrated, reused along your journey to get to the next level, whatever that is, wherever that is, personally or professionally.
Yeah, Kylie, it's so clear, and I can't wait to read a copy of it, because I think it provides a guide for that infinite leadership, as you say, which then translates into lots of different things that have no beginning and no end. And that's what, as you talk, that the image that comes out so powerfully is obviously the infinity symbol, which I'm sure that wouldn't be unique or overly remarkable for anybody else, right? Because that's the word there. But what I love about it is that I get to have a go every day as a leader of self or a leader of others. I get to wake up and have a go, because I've got an endless amount of opportunities to try and try again. And sometimes it's going to be successful and sometimes it's not. That's what I love about it. Like, it's beautiful. It's ongoing, and I'm learning every day. And what I'm learning is feeding into the others. And other things.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I see in leaders as they, the fatigue that comes with every position is, oh my gosh, there's so much new learning to acquire, and there's so much new learning to acquire, and there's so much new learning to acquire. And even if you love learning, that can be a fatiguing process in and of itself, having to level up and level up and level up and level up. But when we consider this infinite concept, it's just the next phase of your journey. And it stops the resentment building up that, oh my gosh, there's something else I have to do. Because I'm like, oh, well, as an infinite leader, this is the journey. And I'm modeling this for others. And I'm modeling this, I changed careers in my 40s after a 20-year career. And what am I modeling for my kids? That the journey's ongoing, right? What am I modeling for my clients is the fact that if you don't like your circumstances, you can recalibrate it if you've got the right tools to do that. And one of the things that I think is a synchronicity between what you do and I do is it takes a deliberate practice to do that. And so often I talk about people unconsciously existing. We're just going through the motions, get up, eat, sleep, work, rinse, repeat. And we lose the fact that what we need to do is take deliberate action. And in my particular model as well, so each of the pillars, each of the letters of infinite represents its own pillar. So right now, for my fourth quarter, am I looking at that identity piece? Who am I right now, and where am I in my journey? Or am I looking at my ecosystem? Do I have the right ecosystem around me that's going to help me get to the next level? And that's certainly been my journey in the last couple of years, is having to continually evolve my ecosystem. Not because I don't love and care for people, but the right people, having the right people in my corner, the right people that I feel psychologically safe around to say, look, Kylie, you're starting to play a little bit small. You're playing safe. You're doing this kind of stuff. Now, I wouldn't take that from everybody, but I would take it from this ecosystem that I've created. So we can hold ourselves back sometimes because we don't have the right people around us that are safe enough for us to challenge us in that way. So are we looking at is it fears that are holding us back? Is it our, innovation, our influence? Are we not getting where we want to go because somehow we've stagnated in creating our influence? do we need to look at how we're communicating that, how we're connecting with others, how we're creating psychological safety in our organization, in our teams, in our conversations? And what's my responsibility here? And so it's a deliberate practice aligned to what you do. And it's these different models to continue that evolution. Because when I go into this team and this organization, these are the deliberate practices that I might need to focus on my identity. Might need to recalibrate the skills and attributes, and I might need to develop my awareness. When I go into this new level position, it might be that ecosystem, or it might be that influence. Because these people knew me for 10 years, I already had the influence. I'm going to an organization that nobody knows me. So I have to establish influence. And that means establishing trust. It means establishing psychological safety. It means, recalibrating that part of my practice so that I can make sure that I'm growing as a leader as I need to be, but also I'm supporting others around to grow in their leadership as well.
Yeah. And Kylee, you mentioned your ecosystem, and I love it. I often refer to it as your personal board of advisors, and I had someone else recently refer to it as their transitional advisory group, so their tag.
Yeah, nice.
Well, I think it's all derivatives of the same thing. Who's in your ecosystem?
Yeah, so the networking group that we're part of, Jane Anderson, is most definitely part of that. And she has created the most nurturing women's group I've ever been. And I looked, so when I started out in business, I didn't have anybody in my ecosystem that were business owners that I could go to and say, what's this about business? My parents, God bless them, were career job people, and career job people that worked leadership positions because they wanted safety and security. They wanted to go to a job, they wanted to pay their mortgage, and they wanted to go home, and that's fine. That's who they were. So when I went into business, they're like, holy gamoly, what are you doing? Right. So they are a part of my ecosystem, but they're not who I go to for support around business. And I tried a number of different groups, so many different groups, to find where I felt safe to, and I remember distinctly probably one of our days that Jane runs for us. And I remember the first time actually sharing my revenue growth that had happened. And that was the first group that I had felt confident enough to even celebrate the success. So that's how you've got a good ecosystem, when you're sharing that and people are like, oh my gosh, that's amazing, instead of, oh, well, who do you think you are?
That's right.
So the women of influence, and a lot of the women in that group have become my ecosystem. I have a really great connection. There's a gentleman in Brisbane called Bosco Anthony, and he's a strategist, and he's a friend and a colleague, and he works in Sydney and he works across Australia, and he's Tanzanian via Canada to Australia, so I love people that have a very different perspective of the world that also can contribute to my ecosystem, because it's not about hanging around people that think and feel exactly the way that you do. Like, yes, we all want to be leaders or whatever, but they bring different perspectives and challenge your thought process and help you grow by those challenging your thinking kind of spaces in a safe and supportive way.
Yeah, I think that's where you do feel it's that safety to reveal things and just to be yourself in an unguarded way. Like I always make the distinction, even if I'm talking about psychological safety or organizational cultures where they really place innovation, they rate it highly. I always say it's not about being reckless. So you don't want to be reckless with a group and unguarded in that sense, but it's being able to contribute where you go, I'm not going to be judged because we're all contributing similar things. And I couldn't agree with you more. What Jane's been able to create for business owners, particularly female business owners, is remarkable. And I guess awesome people like yourself through those channels, right?
I think that, I was talking to someone. I went to my 30-year high school reunion on the weekend, and it was really interesting because they're people from my old ecosystem. And I look at, this group that Jane has crafted, and the people in my ecosystem now have made me feel really excited about the next stage of my journey, that I don't have to play small. And I think that's the other part of it. It's not about, like you said, it's not that recklessness, but it's around those people that are going to give you that confidence to support yourself, to give yourself permission to play bigger in the world, whether that be in your organization, whether that be in your own leadership journey, whether that be in your own personal life, or whether it be in your business and things like that. So you've got a great ecosystem, a great support network. I also talk about a board of advisors model. I have a client and I share with her, I'm like, so you're the CEO of your own life and we're the board of advisors. And she's like, I'd like to second you to the CEO position. And I'm like, yeah, not decision maker, board of advisors, you get to make the decision. She goes, I'd like to take an extended holiday and I'd like you to, so But I think, again, what she needed is that confidence that her board of advisors are there
Yeah.
to support her in her decision making without judgment, right? That's the key part of it. Board of advisors are safe and supportive sounding boards for us, but they're not decision makers.
Yeah.
And we still have to take that deliberate action to remind ourselves that we are the CEO. Whether or not you've got that name on your business card, we're the CEO of our own life, a CEO of our own leadership journey, and that we get to keep that. And we get to make a deliberate choice about who we have in our ecosystem or in our board of advisors or in our tag or in our, whatever that is.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of reviewing the ecosystem, the board of advisors regularly. And I know that when
100%.
I've done that, there is always growth that comes through. And it's not, these relationships are very hard to walk away from because you are so invested and they are so invested in you. And there is that loyalty and that care there for each other. But I think it's also important, particularly in whether we're self-leaders or leading teams and organizations, to know to be tuned in to what you need at that time.
Yes.
Because we need different things. As you say, the ecosystem, from when we go into school, first job, first decade in our career, as we transition into different life stages, it's natural. And I know that this happens for most people. We gravitate and we accumulate different people in our ecosystem, and some might fall out, some new ones might come in. But I think it's important to know what you need.
And 100%. And I also have, and many of us have learnt this lesson along the way. Some people are, in that I was in a stable government job and everyone's like, oh, yeah, that's so, cool. You've got this thing. And when I started to go into business, what I recognized was that some people are really supportive to the level of their comfort.
Yeah.
As opposed to, when I started talking about global leadership initiatives, they're like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah.
And so recognizing that maybe there's nothing wrong. Well, there is nothing wrong with having high aspirations, but if you're a high aspiration person, you need an ecosystem around you that are going to support your aspirations, because even unconsciously, they'll make you shrink by their own biases that they've got around what they think that should look like, whether that's conscious or unconscious.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really hard, and one of my biggest lessons is letting go of someone for that particular reason, who I loved and adored, and I still do love and adore, but they no longer fit in that ecosystem. Because when I started growing in my business and actually walking in alignment with who I think is actually my authentic self, they were like, well, no, we would never do this thing, or we would never do that. And even by saying that, it makes you go, oh, well, should I?
Yeah.
Should I be doing that? Is it okay for me to want this?
Yeah.
So I think that's really, really important to reflect along the way. And it's also, Tasha Eurich in her book Insight, she talks about there's 3 different types of people that we have in our life. We have the unloving critics. They're the people in our world that will find fault with whatever you do. It doesn't matter. You could be the freaking Pope and you could be doing this magical work and they will find fault. You've got the uncritical lovers, the people in your world that will love you and actually won't, you're like, hey, I'm going to totally take this person out of the meeting today. And they're like, oh my gosh, they must have totally deserved it. They must, oh my God, you could do no wrong. Mm-hmm. And then you've got your loving critics, the people in and this is the ecosystem that I guess I aspire to find myself in and encourage people to find. The people that are going to sit there and hold space for you, going to be your biggest champions, but they're also going to hold space and go, hey, Rita, how are you going with that decision? And are you challenging yourself enough? And are you sure on this kind of stuff? Because they want what's best for you in the outcome. Their ego is not attached to your outcomes. They want what's best for you. And I think creating an ecosystem of loving critics are the people that are going to hold space for us and be supportive of us, but also going to challenge our thinking, challenge our thoughts, I think is really imperative as we move forward to get the best people in our world. And when we do that audit, that you were talking about earlier, checking in, I think just like we audit our energy, does this serve me? Does this give me energy? Does it drain my energy? People are the same. Are these people supporting me to get where I need to go and they supporting me on this journey, or are they holding me back? And it doesn't even have to be a deliberate action. It can be unconscious. Or am I holding myself back as a result of having them in because I don't want them to feel bad, or I don't want them to think poorly of me because I'm going ahead, or all of those things that can happen.
Yeah, there's choice in that, right? So and sometimes those choices are hard because we have loyalties, we said, and we've got relationships with these people. But as we shed skin, I think, it's deliberately thinking about what do I need for this stage right now? And that might sound a little harsh or ruthless, but I think, you started our conversation today around conscious choices, and, you were faced with needing to make some conscious choices and decisions given your circumstances. The work that people like you and I do, I'm interested to hear your views in this, Kylee, but I meet people almost on a daily basis that I think you are stuck because you've forgotten that you have a choice. Like, you can actually make a deliberate choice in this, but for some reason, either someone has told you or you feel disempowered and you've forgotten that you actually have choice. You've got the ability to deliberately think through a personal strategy here. We do strategic planning in a business sense all the time, but we seem to forget or not even tune into the fact that we can, participate in personal strategic planning. Those conscious choices, Kylee, that you've made along your way, what's helped to anchor you and give you that power to be able to access then the choices that you could then
I think one of the things is a Glennon Doyle quote from her book Untamed, where she said, "My children don't need me to save them. They need to watch me save myself." And that was a bit like a knife through the heart. And because it was like, okay, what am I modeling here right now? And in the relationship, it was around, I didn't want my children growing up thinking it was okay to treat somebody like that or be on the receiving end of that treatment. So that made it easier for me to make that decision. In leadership, it's the same. I go back into, okay, well, what am I modeling right now as a leader?
Yeah.
Do I want my staff to think that that's okay? So, for example, we talk about, we want, I don't like the word balance, but we want work-life balance and we want all this kind of stuff, and have your lunch break and have, make sure you're making time and do all this kind of stuff. And then as a leader, people are eating their lunch at their desk and they're sending emails at 11 o'clock and there's a misalignment there. What am I modeling right now? So I'm modeling that I say that it's okay to do one thing, but I'm modeling the fact that I see that as weakness to do this, or I don't give myself permission to do this. So if I'm not going to give myself permission, how are my staff going to give themselves permission? Because they're not really sure if it's really okay, or I'm just saying it's okay and it's okay for them. Why is it okay for them and not okay for me? That's one of the really key things. And I'm going to show my age here, but there was a movie, Dangerous Minds, Michelle Pfeiffer. She was an ex-Navy SEAL. She went in to teach this really tough class. And I'm like, and so I have a background in education. At the time, was teaching in the most complex school in Queensland. So I'm like, oh my God, I totally see Michelle Pfeiffer in myself. Like, this is totally nailing it. Couldn't wear the leathers the way she did, but I could see myself. And she says in there, you always have a choice. It may not be a choice you like, but you always have a choice. And I think sometimes we think because we're not choosing between the Maldives and Bali that we don't have a choice.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's about making a choice between the least crappy of crappy decisions. Like, that's actually a choice still.
Yeah.
And so people go, I don't have a choice. Well, you still do. You can still choose whether or not you want to push that deadline back, or you want to do the overtime to get it done and meet the deadline. That's a choice. Neither of them sound great because there's consequences for both, but they actually still are a choice. And I think we associate choices with this, like, I don't know, good fairy kind of idea that they're all magical, like the fairy godmother kind of idea that she's going to grant us our wishes kind of choices kind of idea. And sometimes it's about making a choice and making a decision, and no decision is still a decision. And sometimes people just have to make a decision. And I think that's the other thing we forget. You can make a choice and then you can recalibrate that choice.
Yeah.
So very few choices that we make set in concrete forever and ever. Amen.
Yeah.
We do not have to live and die by that decision. And Adam Grant talks about the right to think again. Gabby Bernstein talks about we can choose again.
Yeah.
So we forget that we can make a choice. I'm going to go do this particular initiative, or I'm going to join up for this networking group, whatever. It's a 1-year fee. And then you get 2 weeks into the group and you're like, oh my gosh, there's such a misalignment. Oh my gosh, I've spent so much money. I've got to stay. Well, you don't. You can ask for a refund, or you can let go of the money and go, this is not serving me. I'm just going to let that go and I can do this. Or you can have a talk to the person running it and say, hey, is there any way of changing that? Like, there's lots of choices that you can create, but we sit there and go, oh God, it's not what I expected it to be. Oh my gosh, I'm just gonna have to suffer through this.
Yeah, we get stuck and
Mm.
and we forget. And I think there's that cloudiness that comes in. So in your work, and I know that you work with so many leaders, what have you been able to identify that are the key attributes or qualities in leaders that you work with that are really deliberate about what they do? What do you see and identify?
It's the leaders that are open to the fact that they don't know everything, and
Yeah.
that they have an open-mindedness to the fact that there's still a lot to learn. Doesn't matter how accomplished they are as a leader, and they've got an openness to learn and be better today than they were yesterday. And that sometimes they'll be ahead of the game and sometimes they're not. And that their willingness to bring their team along with them. I see that, I've gone into organizations where I had someone give me a call and they're like, I'm about ready to manage these people out. You're kind of it. And they kind of got to the point where they'd tried lots of different things and went, I feel like I've given them everything and this is it. And pretty sure this is how it's going to go. But I'm open to the fact that, come and have a crack at it essentially and see how we go. And we were able to completely transform the organization. This person that was going to be managed out ended up being a 2IC in the position, and all of these things, because the leader took a chance, the fact that she didn't know everything, and even though she thought she tried everything, she was open to some other possibilities, and she led with that fact that she was open to trying those things, and that led to the transformation. Equally, I had somebody do the same who wanted everybody else to change but didn't feel they had anything worked, and that didn't get the same outcome as the leader that was open.
There's that being open to other possibilities and almost that having the right to change your mind. I know in adaptive leadership, we talk a lot about leaders being adaptable, but also having a strong sense of self. How do you reconcile that? Like for leaders that want to be really deliberate and really want to give their teams a strong sense of direction and stability, but yet maintain that adaptability. But what's the advice, that you give them to help balance that?
Yeah. So one of the things I do in my tool, I use a particular tool that helps people understand what they need to feel loved, seen, heard, valued, and accepted, and understand that we have healthy versions of ourselves that trigger unhelpful behaviors, and that so we've got an unhealthy version of self, and then we've got a healthy version of ourselves. And it's not about being right and wrong. And when I've done this tool with some leaders, they're like, this is the first time I've felt like it's okay to be me, because we so often have to put on masks about who we think we need to be in leadership. And so we create a narrative of what even an adaptive, oh, well, I must do this or this or that. And when we first accept ourselves as who we are, the good, bad, and the ugly of self, and recognize that when we're in alignment and working towards that healthy version of ourselves, we tend to show up in those most adaptive styles and be more open-minded to things rather than sitting in the unhealthy version of ourselves. So my unhealthy version of myself I can get quite cold and harsh and more direct. That's not who I am in and of my core. I'm a very nurturing, I love, and I'm certainly, not the introvert in the room, but but it's compassionate when I'm in my unhealthy. So again, going back to that self-leadership. So start with self.
Yeah.
Why are you struggling to be adaptive, in this particular space? What's going on for you? And my background has been around understanding those behavior patterns, as a behaviorist, and understanding that often what's going on out here is triggering something inside. So we first need to recognize that to be able to go back and be adaptive and agile in our thinking processes and being open-minded to possibilities instead of limiting ourselves. Because I don't think I've never met anybody. I don't know if yourself in your leadership journey, I don't know a leader that wakes up in the morning and does that big stretch and goes, oh my gosh, my goal today is to do a horrific job as a leader.
That's right.
But, it's like, I think of these evil fingers, oh, everyone wants to do a good job. Some days we're more conscious and able to walk into that, and other days we struggle with that. But those leaders that are really being those infinite leaders are around those ones that recognize that some days they'll be ahead of the game, sometimes they won't. They're compassionate to themselves to go, well, today wasn't my best day. What do I need to reflect, review, recalibrate? Where do I need to maybe repair? And how do we keep moving forward? So one of the things I talk about in my coaching practice is people tell me about an experience and I'm like, okay, so now what?
Mm.
What's the next step? How do we keep this moving forward and not get stuck, like you've mentioned before, in this thing? Oh, I sent, this email and I said the person's wrong name in the email. And, I did this thing. Oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I'm so ashamed. Very easy to get stuck in that. How do we reflect, review, recalibrate? What do I need to do to move forward? And some of it's, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I'm going to send this email. Oh my gosh, Rita, I'm so embarrassed that in the email, I said Jane instead of Rita. My humble apologies. Don't know what I was thinking. Can we, move forward from that? And we don't teach repair a lot.
Yeah.
As humans, we stuff up a lot because, we're human, but we don't actually teach. We don't explicitly teach. We think people know how to repair those things that happen. And we know that I'm sorry doesn't necessarily, like it's a good start, but it doesn't really do it in terms of that repair process, particularly if people say I'm sorry a lot and then don't take action. And also acknowledging there's a difference between intention and impact. So we can sit there and say, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Or, me, I wouldn't mean it like that. So kind of get over it is very dismissive. Whereas, hey, Rita, I really didn't like the way I showed up in that meeting yesterday. There was a misalignment between the intention and the impact I know I had. When you're ready, could we sit down and have a conversation about this? I'd really like to repair this and move forward. I'd love to work through that with you. Which one are you more likely to want to do?
Yeah. The I'm
Right?
sorry is like it's a throwaway. There's a little bit of, well, maybe it is, there's a little bit of awareness in there, but to focus on repair, I love that because you're like, as you were talking to me, what comes to mind is trust. So when I'm
Yeah.
repairing, I'm acknowledging that if I've stuffed something up inadvertently, I talk about trust deficits and trust credit. So
Mm-hmm.
inadvertently, I've created a trust deficit. And now
Mm-hmm.
that repair process enables me to try and rebuild that trust. It's not guaranteed because, of course, there's someone else or a group of people on the other side that they'll need to make that decision around their level of trustworthiness. But
Mm-hmm.
that repair for me is around trust, which is so important. And it's knowing that we're fallible, we don't have all the answers, even though, as you say, we might not intend to set out and create harm, but it
Mm-hmm.
occurs because we're human.
And even acknowledging that, even as the person who is the kindest heart, that would never be your intention. Sometimes it can be the unintended impact. And so, even just acknowledging, whilst that certainly was not my intention, I can understand that the impact for you has been this. I'm so apologetic. How can I repair this with you? Is so much kinder than, oh my, don't be ridiculous. You know me really well. You know I didn't mean it like that.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is like, that's going to be that trust deficit that you talk about, right? Because my feelings are valid. And whilst that may not have been your intention, that's actually how it made me feel.
Mm.
And so, in order for me to build those trust credits back with you, I need you to not necessarily, um, go into this whole, thing, but really just acknowledge and validate that that's what happened for me, regardless of intention. And even that in and of itself, recognizing that that was the impact, even if it wasn't your intention. And because if I can sit there and give someone unconditional positive regard that that wasn't their intention, I'm more likely to want to have a conversation with you. But sometimes I'm feeling quite hurt by this thing, and it's very hard for me to sit there and go, they didn't mean to hurt my feelings. They were so rude the other day, and they don't care about me. Going back and going, hey, Rita, I really didn't show up the way that I wanted to in that meeting. And I understand that I didn't come across the way I intended. When you're ready, would it be okay if we sat down? Let me know when works for you. Is now a good time, or do you need a bit more time? Because you're then validating that you may not be ready to have that conversation with me yet, but I'm here to hold space for you when you are.
Yeah. It's so respectful and it has that authenticity around I want to do good by you.
Yeah.
Even though my intention might have been good, but the impact, which is more, it's about you, not about me, I'm
Mm,
acknowledging and I've got room to really think about what that impact was and how I can repair it. Yeah, I think
yeah.
because we often just focus on the intention, and I think focusing on the intention gives us a bit of a hall pass around, well, that's how I intended it. The way you received it, that's kind of, it's a you problem, not a me problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in terms of, strong psychological safety, the next part of that I would say is when everything's settled down, hey, Rita, when I need to give you some feedback, how would you like me to give it to you? Or if I'm feeling, if you think that I'm not in alignment, like if you feel I'm really stressed and overwhelmed, I know that I don't always show up as my best self when I'm really overwhelmed. What I've been reflecting on is if I'm coming into the meeting and you think that's what's going on for me, if you could say this, that'll give me pause to consider whether or not I need to have this conversation right now versus me going a bull at a gate because I need to get this out and repeating that same pattern of behavior.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to take it in an offensive way if you say it like, if you prompt it like this or you check in like this. So that's the other one. We get quite defensive if someone says, Rita, are you okay? You look quite, agitated in this meeting. You're like, I'm not agitated. I'm ready to go. But when we sit around as a team and go, hey, if I'm wanting to check in on you without you feeling offended by that, how would you like me to bring that up to you in a way that will be received well for you? Because my intention, again, is to show care and concern for you, not judgment. And when we're in those heightened states, we can feel quite defensive when someone says, are you good? And like, of course I'm good. What are you talking about? But if we've pre-practiced that and created a strategy that we've agreed to, then when you say, hey, Kylie, you good? I'm going to go, oh, that's Rita checking in on me in a caring and passionate way, not a judgment that I'm doing anything wrong. I'm going to receive it with that intention, and that's going to eliminate a lot of the problem.
It's saying it without saying it, and I love it. It's so respectful, again, knowing that you're not presupposing the way that the person wants to be checked in with, and you're not overlaying maybe a way that you might like to check in or have people check in on you. I think it's tailored, and that's full of care and compassion, which I think is a great hallmark of a deliberate leader. Kylie, in guiding leaders to establish a really deliberate leadership mindset and practice within their teams and their organizations, are there specific practices or strategies that you find your go-tos that you share most often with leaders?
Yeah, so I talk a lot about having a really strong reflective practice. And I think it's not it's something that you might hear in meditation or gratitude or journaling. And so sometimes when you are maybe a type A type leader or a thing, that might feel a bit woo-woo for you. But metacognition is part of our executive functioning skills, and thinking about thinking and that reflective practice is how we get growth. Where am I now? Not judgmentally. Where do I want to be? What's the outcome I'm seeking? And what are the steps to get there? So I'm really reflecting, because when we don't have something that we're working towards, we can kind of wander aimlessly and we can expend an exorbitant amount of energy and not get to our destination, which burns us out, both individually and as a team and an organization. So having a reflective practice is, what's the outcome we're seeking here? Individually, collectively, what's the goal? And are we all on the same page that that's actually the goal? And what do we think are the deliberate steps we need to take? But how do we recalibrate that? But that's really strong reflective practice. Where are we right now? The other one, I think I do this activity with people where I divide the page in two, and I say to people, what's working really well right now? And how can we do more of that? And then what's not working? And everyone wants to get to the what's not working section. They want to skip the good part, and they want to get to the, oh my gosh, I'm going to air my grievances. What's not working well, and what do we need to change, reduce, or eliminate? And I remember I had this client one day, and I said, I haven't seen you in a month. We're going to do this activity. And she had one thing on the good side, what's been working well. And I'm saying, so in 31 days, you are here to tell me that there's only been one good thing in your life that's been working well for you in 31 days. And she's like, oh, well, when you put it like that, but she had like 15 things on the things that weren't working well for her. So making her go back and reflect and think about it and acknowledge some good that was happening, because then we know that success leaves clues. Yeah. So what are we doing in this practice that's working well for us, and how can we do more of that? Like, I really love the conversation you had with Johnny the other day, because I could see that he was really overwhelmed. And afterwards he was about to come back, get what he needed to get done. And we met that deadline on time. Can you share with us what's happening here? That causes that person to reflect, what did I do? Because again, that unconscious existing part is we go through the motions of things. In leadership and in education, we talk about different types of supports we put in the classroom. And the great teachers are like, I don't know, I just do it. Isn't that what everybody else does? No, actually, it's not. So having a reflective practice to go, what did I do well in that situation? How did I get that behavior change? How did I get that kid to do that thing? And it's the same in leadership. Having a really strong reflective practice where we're asking, and the other one I would say is ask better questions.
Mm.
If you're not getting the outcome you want, 9 times out of 10, I'd say you're asking the right question, asking the wrong questions
Yeah.
of yourself and of others.
It's my favorite one too, and I reckon as leaders we trade knowledge. I often talk about we trade knowledge, and therefore we our value and worth is around providing the answer. And I really try and reset that. And well, what if the value that you provided was actually through questions, and your worth is actually not about providing the answer, but helping others to unlock a solution? It kind of takes
Mm.
the pressure off, and then all you need is a good go-to list of questions, which then you don't unconsciously they'll come. You don't need to even think about them. That will still prompt that level of thinking in different people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've seen like great leaders. I've got a really good colleague of mine, and he will sit there and usually what happens, he goes, no one's ever asked me that before. And he's been a leader for a very long time. Sometimes it's around challenging that thinking, usually from a safe person. So if somebody asks you that question that doesn't feel safe, that might be received differently. It's a very common practice, my client. No one's ever described it to me that way, or no one's ever kind of put it together that way for me, or no one's ever asked me that way. So, thinking out of the box, sometimes it's around, you might end up at the same, this end point, but getting people to think differently about their circumstances is hugely powerful because, again, it helps people move, get unstuck, and it helps them create a shift. And once you challenge thinking, people start thinking about those possibilities that could be rather than what they feel that they're stuck in right now. And I think that's very key in things like I had a colleague who said to me that they're working for a large organization and their boss had this conversation with them about, that book, Surrounded by Idiots, where they talk about the different colors. You're a red or a yellow or whatever. And he's talking to me and he's like, blah, 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 blah. And she's going, because you're a red and this. And I'm sitting there going, maybe I shouldn't be a coach anymore because I don't see you as in my head, I'm like, oh, maybe I don't see you as a red. Oh my God, am I like completely useless in my job? And I went, okay, ask yourself a better question. Is that the way I receive that person in a different context to their environment that they're currently in? So I'm like, I went away and I reflected, they're telling this conversation. When I went back, I just said to them, do you think your boss sees you as a red because when she employed you, she needed a red leader to take the lead on a whole heap of these initiatives? And because your zone of competence is you can step into that space, you went, righto, let's go. And I said, but what do you see yourself as in your zone of genius? And he's like, well, I see myself more as a yellow. And I'm like, excellent. Do you think some of your fatigue could be because you're walking in your zone of competence versus zone of genius because of the nature of the role that you were employed to? And has that changed or what could you do? And they're like, game changing. Everything changed within a month because they were a very proactive action taker.
Yeah.
Just by asking them. So in their work environment, that person had been asking all the questions around how to do that as a red. My question was, is that actually who you are?
Yeah.
And experiencing them in a different space. So yeah, that better questions thing is so powerful. And then getting them to reflect on that.
Yeah. It's also a good point around how others might see us and what we lead with, which I think that is again a deliberate choice. So whilst it might be very useful for others to see us in a particular way and pigeonhole us in a particular way, that's not always going to serve us. Kylee, I've got literally 3 pages of notes from our conversation, and I'm hoping that as people are walking or listening to this in the car, that it's worth listening to this again, because I have a feeling, and I'm going to do that post-editing process, because I think there are so many nuggets that you've been able to share that really lead us back to the title of your new book is Infinite Leadership. It's out in a couple of months, and we'll definitely help you get that out to our audience anyway, and let them know about it. But I think there's also, through this conversation, those infinite possibilities. We've had a large bulk of our discussions focused around choice and making those deliberate choices. So thank you so much, Kylee. I've really, really loved our conversation.
Oh, so exciting, Rita. And thank you so much. We're talking about that energy before you do your audits on those people, but also the conversations that you're involved in. And I love these conversations because I just come away feeling so energized, ready to rock for the day. So
Me
it's
too.
always so exciting. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. See you soon, Kylee. Thank you.
See ya.